All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have had some technical difficulties, so we apologize. We're about a minute late. Before we get started, I'm going to wait just a few more seconds. I see that people are now just being let into the webinar. So I'm going to allow, like I said, just a few more seconds for people to join, and then we will go ahead and get started. And as we are waiting to begin, you can, of course, find the handout for today's presentation in the handout section. And then any questions you have throughout the presentation, feel free to put them into the question box, or you can email them to us directly, which I'll go over our email address in just a moment. All right, it looks like those who are joining have joined. So once again, thank you so much for your patience today, and sorry about the delay. All right, so before we get started, I always like to introduce myself. My name is Adina Glincher, and I am the Senior HR Services Advisor here at PayEntry. As I mentioned, any questions you have during the presentation, you can put in the question box, or you can email our team directly at hrservices@payentry.com. And as always, this training does not constitute legal advice. If you have questions for your legal team, we ask that you direct those to them. And for any questions about the content of the training or just more about our offerings, you can email us as well. So why are we here today? Today, we're going to be talking about recruiting trends. So some of the trends we're going to be speaking about are the shift from a reactive to a proactive approach, utilizing social media, understanding the value of employee benefits, discussing hiring remote or hybrid workers, identifying the possibility of high volume recruitment becoming a reality. We're going to focus on the importance of employer branding and demonstrate a greater focus on candidate experience. And then we're going to talk about the importance of prioritizing diversity, equity, and inclusion, which we had an entire webinar on already. If you missed it, you can find it on our YouTube channel or on our website, payentry.com/webinars. And then we're also going to talk about brainstorming how to appeal to a new generation of workers. So before we dig into each of these trends, I just want to point out that these webinars are, the goal of them is to give you a high-level overview of these topics. And if during any of our webinars you ever have questions and you want us to dig deeper into the topic, just go ahead and shoot us a message. We're always happy to take some of your ideas for future webinars or reach out to you directly if you need some support. So always keep that in mind. So I know if you're anything like me, you're probably looking at the screen and saying, you are making me hungry. It's 11 o'clock here Pacific time, right before lunch. So I apologize for that. But we wanted to use a fun analogy before we got into these different trends. And let's take a moment and think of recruiting as sales rather than a product or service. It is your job as a business owner or manager to sell the company's culture, the position, and more. So how would you design an ice cream stand? And we use this analogy, you can see the different ways. And they very much align with the recruiting trends we're going to be talking about. So in order to design your ice cream stand, you need to identify your target audience. Who are your customers? Why do they want to buy ice cream from you? You need to incorporate diversity, equity, and inclusion. Are you able to provide multiple and diverse selections, or are you only providing different kinds of chocolate ice cream, for example? When it comes to job descriptions, will you provide detailed descriptions of your menu? No one wants to buy ice cream from an ice cream store that just has, a single word describing the flavor instead of more details, so you know what you're getting yourself into when you commit to that flavor. Employer branding, are you confident and do you sound credible? Social media, how will you promote your ice cream? How are people going to know your stand exists? Remote and hybrid work. Will customers come to the ice cream stand, or will you deliver, or will you offer both? Reviews, feedbacks, and referrals. How will you measure customer loyalty and referrals? Maybe you have one of those punch cards for how often people come and visit you and they get a reward for coming back. And then lastly, the candidate experience. How will you create a positive customer experience? So we just wanted to start with this, a little bit of something fun before we get into the nitty-gritty of the trends. And it's important to always establish, why do we care about this topic? So as many of you are probably experiencing, a lot of the strategies businesses used to recruit 10 plus years ago or even before the COVID-19 pandemic are likely not working in today's market. Employees need and want different things. With that, it brings us into our first trend, which is reactive to proactive. So a proactive approach is when you are intentionally and highly targeting certain individuals or certain skills. You're actively searching for candidates for each specific position, and you're recruiting before the hiring demands are apparent. And I know this can often be difficult. Chances are your only job is not recruiting. You're probably also a manager or a business owner, and it may be difficult to stay on top of this. But if you are proactive in your recruiting strategy, you will ideally actually be recruiting before you even need to be. It will involve moving efficiently but thoughtfully through the recruiting and hiring process. And reactive approaches often look transactional, whereas proactive approaches allow you to build more relationships, look more relational. So that's just something to kind of keep in mind when you're trying to figure out what approach you're currently using. Social media, this is the second trend we're going to be talking about. We have been talking about this for a while now. It's likely not new, and you're likely already taking advantage of it. Social outlets such as LinkedIn, Indeed, and Glassdoor are important in the current and future recruiting environment. Social media allows businesses to post job opportunities that target certain industries and skills. Modern ways of recruiting will allow you to attract quality applicants and do so more efficiently. You're able to reach people in different locations, or maybe just quicker than if you were to post it the old-fashioned way. And it's important to remember that candidates want to have easy ways to apply to your positions. So they want to be able to just press a button on their smartphone or their laptop, or go through an application or upload a resume via an application. So keep all that in mind when deciding which platform to use. Now, valued employee benefits, this is a trend that I think has probably always been in existence, but it's definitely changed throughout the years, and especially since pre-COVID. So what does valued mean? Valued benefits are going to differ in interpretation depending on your employees. Consider conducting regular surveys to gauge which benefits are valued most by your employees. And honestly, we recommend you do this at least once a year, because what your employees value this year may very well differ than what they value next year. According to the 2022 Pulse of HR, organizations have increased the benefits they're offering by an average of 22% compared to what they were offering before the pandemic. And always consider offering some out-of-the-box benefits. So the ones that you see on the screen, those are generally included. Health insurance, paid vacation, meal breaks, depending on your state, may be legally required. But maybe consider commuter assistance or tuition reimbursement, maybe student loan assistance, or some type of health or well-being stipend. So really figure out what it is your employees and candidates are looking for, and adjust your benefits to reflect those things. Next, this is another topic we've been talking about for the last few years, hiring remote and hybrid workers. So 4 in 10 HR leaders with a remote workforce say that remote and hybrid work improves employee emotional, physical, financial well-being, boosts their retention, enhances quality of work, and increases productivity. Now, you might be thinking this is a great statistic, but I can't offer remote work in my industry. That's okay if that's the case. Figure out what you can offer that will have the same effect on your employees. And if you need some help, reach out to our team. We're happy to brainstorm with you. The number of companies offering remote or hybrid work has increased by 124% since before the pandemic. And those offering flexible scheduling have increased by 50%. And then, of course, having remote employees allows you to have no limit to your geographic proximity. So, like I said, I'm sitting in the Pacific time zone, and many of you are probably in a different time zone than me, but we're still able to conduct this training today because of remote work, which is amazing. All right, high volume recruitment. So this is a fairly new trend. High volume recruitment requires filling a large number of positions in a short period of time. So traditionally, this was viewed as being exclusively for hourly, seasonal, or graduate recruits. But over the past year, there has been an increase for regular full-time roles. On average, a recruiter's workload has increased by 28% since before the pandemic, and 65% of companies have high volume recruitment needs today. So it's important that as organizations consider their talent acquisition strategies for the next year, that they prioritize high volume recruitment, and they're using technology solutions that are equipped for this. Many traditional applicant tracking systems, unfortunately, are not designed for high volume recruitment. So it's important that you're reevaluating the systems you're using and consider some new ones as well. Employer branding. So employer branding is company reputation, including thoughts about your product, services, leaders, team members, history, and more. Without an employer brand, hiring and retaining the best employees becomes challenging. And toward the end of the presentation today, we're going to share a bunch of statistics with you all, but pretty much what we have found through our research is when people are looking for a job nowadays, they're not just applying to anything they qualify for. They are looking at the company they're applying for, they're researching the company, and they want to make sure that they are going to be working and supporting a company that aligns with their vision and their values, which is part of why employer branding is so crucial. So the first step in implementing an employer branding process is to get familiar with your company. So know your core business, your vision, mission, values, and culture, and make sure that you understand your goals and objectives. Step 2 is to do an audit of your employer brand. How do you do this? Conduct research, both internally and externally, with applicant surveys, employee engagement surveys, and identify areas that need improvement. Step 3 is define an employer value proposition. An employer value proposition encompasses your organization's missions, values, and culture, and gives employees a powerful reason to work for you. Pretty much it's everything your company can offer as an employer in exchange for all the skills and experience your employees bring to the table. So why should they come work for you? Use recruitment marketing. So that might sound a little silly. We often don't talk about marketing when we're talking about human resources, but marketing is directly involved in recruitment. We mentioned the target market on the ice cream slide. Who are you trying to reach? What do they want? Who is your target audience? And how are you going to convince them to apply to your company? Just a different step of looking at, or a different way, of looking at recruitment. Step 5 is build engagement among current employees. I think that one's pretty self-explanatory, right? Make sure your current employees feel excited to be working for your company and engaged while doing so. And step 6, focus on your job description. So job posts are often the first contact candidates have with your company. And then assuming they make it through to an offer, they often get a job description. So make sure you're focusing on really evaluating the posts and the job descriptions, making sure that not only are they legally compliant, but they're a good representation of your business and the candidates you want to attract. 59% of candidates go to your company page after hearing about a job opportunity and learn details about your organization. And as we talk about these, I encourage you to think about the last time you applied for a job and the things you did once finding a potential posting that intrigued you. You probably did some research on the company. You maybe looked at their reviews or reached out to a colleague who had some type of connection to hear how their experience was. So people are often going to take that extra step and figure out more about the company they're considering working for. So have a greater focus on the candidate experience. The candidate experience is how a potential candidate feels about your company as a potential employer based on a series of interactions. So these interactions include all steps from job application and screening all the way to interview and onboarding. That's known as the candidate process. Even if a candidate isn't the right fit, they should still leave with a positive view of your company. And that is absolutely huge. You're going to likely look at a lot of resumes or interview a lot of people, and you're not, of course, going to be able to hire each one of them. But make sure that if you choose not to hire them, they know that. You've communicated with them, you've let them know they're not the right fit, or that you've just found a different candidate this time that you're going to move forward with. Because you want to make sure that everybody applying to your company has a good experience. So some metrics to consider include application abandonment, length of time from application to offer. Are your candidates going to 1 or 2 interviews, or are they going to 8 or 9 interviews, and is it taking a month to get them on board? Recruiter response time, offer acceptance rate, candidate satisfaction, referrals, and net promoter score. All right, so we have a bunch of fun statistics on this page or this slide. So regarding the application process, 60% of applicants will actually abandon the recruitment process if it is too complex or stressful. So of course, it is important that you make sure the people applying to your position have the qualifications to do the position they're applying for, and we understand that. But it's important that any steps you ask your applicants to take actually align with the position they're applying for. So if you're having them take some kind of, maybe a skills test, a Microsoft Word or Excel test, and they're not using that for their job, then that will likely be looked at as too complex or stressful or maybe a waste of their time, and they may likely not move forward. 17% of job candidates have not applied for a job because of the employer's process was too lengthy or complicated. When it comes to candidate communication, which I briefly touched on, nearly 63% of candidates report being dissatisfied with the level of communication from most employers after applying. How many of us have applied to a job and never heard back, right? It's not a good feeling. 83% of candidates say it would greatly improve the overall experience if employers could set expectations by providing a clear timeline of the hiring. That is a lot of people who would greatly prefer that, if not more, I'm sure. And it's fairly easy to do. You should know when you want to ideally bring somebody on board and be able to communicate that with the candidate. When it comes to reviews and referrals, 82% of job seekers consider employer brand and reputation before applying to a job. A 7% increase in the past 5 years. So like I said, people aren't just applying to every job they qualify for anymore. And 55% of job seekers report avoiding certain companies after reading negative reviews online. Regarding the interview process, 65% of candidates say that a bad interview experience makes them lose interest in the job. And 46% of candidates who withdraw from recruiting process do so because they believe their time has been disrespected during interviews. That's another really big one. We obviously want the people we're interviewing to come on time. We want them to have researched our company. We want them to have prepared a resume or a cover letter and really sell themselves to us. But it's important to consider, what are we doing as a company to prepare for the interview? Are we showing up on time? Are we rescheduling multiple times? Because as much as we want the candidate to respect our time, we need to respect theirs. And lastly, business impact. 41% of candidates who have a negative experience will take their alliances, product purchases, and relationships somewhere else. So this is now going to affect the business side of things. On the contrary, 64% of candidates who have a positive experience say that they'll increase their relationship with that brand. And lastly, companies that take the time to develop a positive candidate hiring experience report a 70% improvement in the quality of hires. All right. The next trend we're going to focus on is diversity, equity, and inclusion, and prioritizing those practices in your recruiting practices. So job seekers largely prefer to work for companies that walk the walk when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. What do we mean by walk the walk? We all know that phrase, right? Anybody can talk about DE&I, anyone can talk about implementing it, but unless you are actually showing that you are incorporating DE&I in your actions, candidates will often not be interested in the job. Increasing the number of traditionally underrepresented people in the workforce does not automatically produce benefits. Companies need to make a real commitment to creating a workplace culture that supports DE&I. Some more statistics for all of you, because we love those. 76% of employees and job seekers said diversity was important when considering job offers. That's over 3/4 of people looking for jobs. 37% of workers and job seekers said they wouldn't even apply to a company that was rated negatively by people of color. Once hired, 78% would consider finding a new job if they found their employer wasn't actually committed to diversity in the workplace. So you have to walk the walk. And 86% of Gen Z job seekers cite a company's commitment to diversity as an important factor in deciding whether to accept an offer. So if you weren't already convinced to incorporate DE&I in your organization, hopefully these statistics will win you over. And the last trend we want to focus on is appealing to a new generation of workers, because you can see the years millennials and Generation Z are born, and those are going to be majority of our workforce. If not now, then in the next few years, they absolutely will be. So generally, millennials, when accepting a job offer, focus on salary, work-life balance, and career. They expect the big three. So your medical insurance, PTO, and retirement savings, although those are absolutely a benefit, those are pretty much expected at this point. So what are you offering that goes above and beyond them? They are looking for bonus incentives, student loan repayment, and maternity and paternity leave, which makes sense given their likely ages. Now, when we focus on Gen Z, when accepting a job offer, they also focus on salary and work-life balance, but rather than career growth, they're generally focused on their actual job duties. They also expect the big three: medical insurance, paid time off, and retirement. They're looking for maternity and paternity benefits as well as student loan repayment, and also tuition reimbursement, which once again aligns with the age group. So new generations want innovation and streamlined tech solutions throughout the hiring process. 54% of Gen Z candidates say they won't even apply if your recruiting methods are outdated. So how can you update your recruiting methods? Make it easy for candidates to learn about your employer brand, find the right positions, and apply with a unique and enticing careers page. Maybe it's a one-click and apply. Utilize recruitment event software for students to quickly check in, share digital resumes, and hear back from employers. Consider job board software that can simplify the application process with mobile-friendly solutions that allow candidates to apply anywhere on any device. Offer flexibility when completing screenings and interviews, such as video interviews, while still offering face-to-face communication. And keep candidates engaged and help them learn more about your organization with automated and customized email and text communication while you evaluate the candidate. Over the next 10 years, the number of new generations will triple in the workforce. So it's important that we're staying on top of these new trends. So as always, we like to provide you with as much information as we can during these webinars, but we know you often have questions. So please visit us at payentry.com/webinars to learn more about the do's and don'ts of interviewing and DE&I, which were our most recent webinars. There's also many more on there. And of course, our HR professionals and our HR services team can help you update or create employee handbooks and company policies, dive deeper, into each of these recruiting trends, brainstorm ways you can reinvent your recruitment process, keep up with changing state and federal laws, and assist with day-to-day HR best practices, forms, policies, and more. Our HR services compliance package also includes a learning management system with a broad array of employee and manager electronic trainings, including state compliant and harassment prevention training. All right, so that is all the trends we have for you today. Now let's check our questions box and see if we have any questions. All right, I'm not seeing any, which means we either bombarded you or provided you with all the information you need. Well, if you have a question and you just haven't had the chance to submit it, go ahead and email us at hrservices@payentry.com or hrservices, at payentry.com. And thank you all so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Join us again in 2 weeks on Thursday at the same time for our next webinar.